She stepped onto the stage in a dress stitched from borrowed fabric, her hands trembling, her eyes searching the crowd. Some whispered, "Poor girl." They saw her poverty. What they didn't see was the fire in her soul. And just when the silence was about to swallow her whole, a stranger stood up. Everything changed. Before we begin this deeply moving true story of courage, kindness, and quiet love, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories that touch the heart and remind us what truly matters. Now, let's begin. The summer sun beat down on the roof of an aging RV parked along the dusty edge of a quiet Oklahoma town. A light breeze stirred the wildflowers that lined the gravel shoulder, sending dandelion seeds into the air like tiny wishes on the wind. Inside the RV, the air was thick with the scent of motor oil, cotton fabric, and dreams held together by hope. Sawyer Prescott wiped sweat from his brow with the back of a grease-stained hand, then bent over the open hood of a battered Ford pickup. The man knew engines better than he knew most people. They didn't judge, didn't whisper behind his back, didn't look at his daughter with pity. With engines, he could fix what was broken. With life, that was harder. From the open side window of the RV came the soft hum of classical music, Swan Lake playing from an old radio that crackled with static. It was her favorite. He smiled. Inside, 8-year-old Gracie Prescott stood barefoot on the creaky linoleum floor, twirling in circles in a makeshift ballet skirt made from an old white tablecloth. Her small hands had tied faded pink ribbons to the waist, and every time she spun, the skirt flared like something magical. Her long chestnut hair flew behind her, and in her eyes danced the kind of light only a child untouched by cynicism could hold. "Daddy, do I look like a real ballerina?" she asked, peeking out the window with flushed cheeks. Sawyer straightened up and turned toward her. His back ached, his hands were filthy, and his shirt clung to him from hours of labor. But none of that mattered when he looked at her. "You look like the star of the New York Ballet," he said, grinning. Gracie giggled. "They wear real costumes." "Real is in their heart," he replied. "And you've got more heart than all of them combined." She gave him a little curtsy and ducked back inside, returning to her world of pirouettes and possibilities. Sawyer turned back to the engine, but his thoughts drifted. He'd been on the road for almost 2 years now, moving from job to job, fixing engines, patching roofs, replacing tires, whatever it took to keep them afloat. The RV wasn't much, but it was home. And it was theirs. He wiped his hands on a rag and climbed the rickety steps into the RV, pausing as he saw Gracie arranging a handful of dandelions in a plastic cup. "What's that for?" he asked. "Wishes," she said. "One for me, one for you, one for Mom in heaven." His chest tightened. He never talked much about her mom. Gracie was only 5 when cancer took her. Too young to understand grief, but old enough to feel its whole. He crossed the small space and crouched beside her. "You making wishes again?" Gracie nodded solemnly. "I wished I could dance on a real stage, with lights and clapping." Sawyer took a breath. "Then we better find you a stage." Her eyes lit up. "Really?" Before he could answer, he spotted a bright flyer taped to the convenience store window across the street. He stepped out of the RV and jogged over, squinting against the sun. Summer Jubilee talent show this Saturday. Open to all ages. Sign up at the town square. His heart skipped. It wasn't Lincoln Center, but it was a stage, and for Gracie, that might be enough. That evening, over peanut butter sandwiches and powdered lemonade, Sawyer told her about the show. "You'll need to practice," he said, handing her a worn-out pair of flats he'd repurposed from thrift store finds. He'd sewn ribbons onto them himself. "They're perfect," she whispered, hugging them to her chest. That night, after Gracie had fallen asleep curled up under a crocheted blanket, Sawyer stepped outside and sat on the steps of the RV. The stars were bright, brighter than he'd seen in a while, and the air smelled of earth and summer. He pulled out his wallet and stared at the photo tucked inside. Gracie, at age 5, in her mother's arms, both smiling. It had been the last picture before the hospital took everything away. "I'm doing my best," he whispered to the night. "I hope it's enough." A gust of wind sent a lone dandelion puff rolling across the dry dirt at his feet. He picked it up gently, held it between his fingers, and closed his eyes. He didn't wish for money, or success, or comfort. He wished for her happiness. And maybe, just maybe, for a miracle. The morning sun crept through the cracks in the RV blinds, casting golden slivers of light across the small kitchen counter. Gracie was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the worn cushions of the built-in bench, lacing the pink ribbons of her makeshift ballet slippers. The shoes weren't perfect, one sole was slightly off-center, and the ribbons were mismatched, but in her eyes they were magic. Sawyer poured 2 mugs of instant cocoa, one with extra marshmallows. He handed her the mug with a wink. "Fuel for greatness," Gracie beamed. "I practiced in my dreams last night." "Oh yeah?" Sawyer smiled as he sat across from her. "What did the audience look like?" "All in suits and sparkly dresses, and one lady had a dog in a tuxedo." Sawyer laughed, his chest warming. There were moments when she made him forget the weight of the world. Moments when the burden of scraping by, of hustling from town to town, job to job, lifted for just a while. "I think we need to upgrade your stage," he said, tapping his chin in mock thought. "That rug's too slippery." "Maybe outside?" she asked, eyes wide with hope. Outside meant being seen, judged, maybe even laughed at. But Sawyer nodded. "Only if you want to." "I do," she said, already jumping to her feet. They spent the afternoon clearing a small patch behind the RV park, just gravel, weeds, and a few stubborn dandelions. Sawyer found a piece of plywood from a broken fence, laid it flat, and even nailed down the corners to keep it steady. Gracie danced, twirls, hops, poses, not perfect, not polished, but full of something raw and beautiful. A few other RV park residents watched from afar. One woman smiled, an old man nodded, and a young boy clapped. Gracie curtsied after every practice set, whether there was applause or not. But behind every step, there was something deeper, Sawyer noticed. Determination. Grace. That stubborn, quiet courage her mother had once carried too. Later that evening, Sawyer went into town while Gracie napped, her legs curled beneath her, her cheeks flushed from rehearsal. He found the Summer Jubilee sign-up booth under a striped tent near the town square. A kind-looking elderly woman, Nettie Monroe, sat behind the folding table with a clipboard. "You here to register someone?" she asked. Sawyer shifted awkwardly. "Yeah, my daughter, Gracie Prescott." "Age?" 8. "And what's her talent?" "Ballet." He hesitated, then added, "Self-taught." Nettie gave him a long look, not judging, just observing. "I've seen some of the finest dancers forget what joy looks like. Self-taught might be exactly what this town needs." He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "She'll need to be here Friday afternoon for rehearsal," Nettie continued, writing Gracie's name in loopy cursive. "Talent shows Saturday evening. Outdoor stage, wood flooring, no mirrors." "Perfect," he said. On the way back, he stopped at the dollar store and found a roll of gold ribbon. Not much, but it shimmered when it caught the light. Gracie could tie it in her hair. He also spotted a small keychain shaped like a ballerina. He turned it over in his hand, wondering if it was too childish. But then again, she was 8, and still very much his little girl. Back at the RV, Gracie was up again, sketching stick-figure dance poses in a notebook. She looked up as he walked in, her smile wide and sleepy. "I signed you up," he said, handing her the ribbon. She gasped, eyes round. "For real?" "For real." She leapt into his arms, hugging him tight. "I won't let you down." He held her close. "You never could." That night, as he lay awake, Sawyer stared at the RV ceiling, thinking about what this meant. A public performance meant attention, exposure. And in a small town, people talked. He'd seen it before, how quickly judgment came when folks noticed a child without a mother, a father without a stable address. He thought about the stares Gracie might face, about the whispers, about the word he hated most, pity. But he also remembered the way she danced, with abandon, with heart, as if her tiny feet could lift off the ground and carry her into another world. He decided then and there, whatever it took, he'd protect that light in her. He wouldn't let life dim it. Not with doubt. Not with fear. Not even with the truth of their situation. The next morning, Gracie practiced with even more focus. Her movements became sharper, her footwork more confident. Sawyer played music from his old cassette tapes, some Tchaikovsky, some jazz, even a few movie scores. She danced to them all, and after each routine, she would look up at him and ask, was it enough? Every time he would say, more than enough. By Thursday evening, the nerves had started to settle in. Gracie sat quietly, folding her gold ribbon again and again. "You okay?" Sawyer asked. "I'm scared they'll laugh," she said softly. "Because of my skirt, because I'm not real." Sawyer knelt in front of her. "Hey, you listen to me, Gracie girl. You're as real as they come. You've got more bravery in your pinky toe than most folks have in their whole bodies." She blinked up at him. "But what if I fall?" "Then you get back up, you bow, and you remind them that dancers don't give up." She smiled a little. "That's what Mom would say, huh?" He nodded, eyes stinging. "Yeah, exactly that." The Friday afternoon sun hung low over the town square, casting long golden shadows across the pavement. Folding chairs lined the green space, while a small wooden stage, scuffed from years of county fairs and summer concerts, stood proudly at the centre, draped in red, white and blue bunting. The air buzzed with laughter, the clink of soda cans, and the occasional squawk of a microphone being tested. Sawyer parked the RV a few blocks away and took a long look at his daughter. Gracie sat silently in the passenger seat, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her skirt. Still the same hand-sewn tablecloth from their home, but now freshly washed and smelling faintly of lavender detergent. Her hair was braided carefully, with the gold ribbon wound through like sunlight trapped in silk. He crouched beside her and took her hand. "You ready, Firefly?" She didn't answer right away. "What if they think I'm weird?" she whispered. Sawyer's throat tightened. He remembered that feeling, walking into rooms where people already decided who you were. Poor kid, outsider, doesn't belong. He squeezed her hand gently. "Let them think whatever they want. You're not here for them. You're here for you." She looked at him, her expression trembling between fear and determination. Then she nodded. They walked hand in hand to the sign-in tent, where Mrs. Nettie Monroe, the elderly event organizer, sat with her clipboard and a warm smile. "Well now," she said, eyeing Gracie with approval. "Ain't you a beam of light?" Gracie blushed. "Thank you, ma'am." "You're Prescott's girl," Nettie said to Sawyer. "I remember your wife." "Sweet soul." Sawyer nodded, words caught in his throat. "This is Gracie. She's dancing." "I know." Nettie tapped her clipboard. "Been looking forward to it?" As they walked toward the stage, Sawyer could already feel the stares. Parents sizing them up, kids whispering behind phones. A boy in a clean, pressed polo shirt nudged his friend and said, "She's got a curtain for a dress." Gracie flinched. Sawyer crouched down, leveled his eyes with hers. "Look at me." She looked. "You were strong and brave. And that dress? That's not a curtain. That's armor." "Okay." She smiled, small but real, and climbed the steps to the stage. Sawyer stepped back to the grass, arms crossed, trying to look calm as his heart hammered. The MC called out, "Gracie Prescott, age 8, dancing solo." A hush fell over the crowd. Gracie stood center stage, dwarfed by the space, her tiny frame barely moving. Then the whispers started. "Poor girl. What is she wearing?" Bless her heart. Sawyer heard every word, each one cut deeper than the last. He clenched his jaw, his hands balled into fists at his sides. But he didn't move. He couldn't show anger. Not now. Not here. Gracie turned her head, searching the crowd. He caught her gaze. He smiled. She took a deep breath. Then the music started, Tchaikovsky's Waltz of the Flowers, slightly warped from the old CD player backstage. She began to dance. At first, her steps were hesitant. Her foot slipped slightly. Her arms were stiff. But then something shifted, something only Sawyer could see. She closed her eyes, and she danced not for the crowd, not for the judges, not for their approval. She danced for the joy of it. Each twirl grew bolder, each leap lighter. The ragged hem of her skirt flared with grace. Her bare feet hit the wooden stage with rhythm, not precision, but with heart. And then silence. Music faded. She froze in final pose, arms raised, head tilted, eyes shining. For a moment, no one moved. Then came a single clap from the back. Kate Waverley stood beneath the shade of a magnolia tree, hands poised, her eyes wet. She clapped again, then another, and another, until the whole lawn erupted into applause. Gracie blinked in surprise. Sawyer had to swallow hard before he could shout, "That's my girl!" She beamed. Backstage, Sawyer wrapped her in a hug. "You flew, Firefly. You lit up the sky." Gracie looked up. Did they like it? They didn't just like it. They felt it. Just then, a woman approached, tall, elegant, with a slight limp in her right leg. Her face was familiar, though Sawyer couldn't place it. "That was beautiful," she said softly. Her voice was low, melodic, but carried a gravity that made people listen. "You danced like someone who doesn't just hear the music, but lives it." Gracie smiled shyly. "Thank you." The woman extended her hand. "I'm Kate." Sawyer's eyes narrowed slightly. "Kate Waverley?" The name clicked. "You're—" he began. She nodded. "Once, long time ago." They shook hands. "I hope you don't mind," she said to Gracie, "but I'd like to stop by tomorrow before the show. Maybe we could warm up together." Gracie's jaw dropped. "You mean like a duet?" Kate smiled. "No, I mean like two dancers who believe in the magic of a good story." Gracie looked at her dad, eyes wide with astonishment. Sawyer nodded. "If that's what you want." "Yes," Gracie squealed. Kate winked. "Then I'll see you tomorrow, Gracie Prescott." She walked away slowly, her limp barely noticeable. Sawyer watched her go, his mind turning. Maybe, just maybe, something unexpected had been set in motion. The sun was beginning its slow descent by the time Kate Waverley arrived at the makeshift outdoor stage the next day. The Saturday air was heavy with anticipation, mixed with the buttery smell of popcorn and the distant crackle of a grill. Children ran between tents, faces painted like tigers and butterflies. Adults gathered in circles, trading laughter and stories over lemonade and lawn chairs. But Kate wasn't here for the celebration. She was here for something quieter, something that tugged at her in a way she hadn't felt in years. She spotted Gracie sitting on the steps to the stage, hugging her knees and humming softly to herself. Her gold ribbon caught the light like a strand of sunlight. Sawyer stood nearby, arms crossed, scanning the crowd with cautious eyes, a man constantly alert, always one breath away from defense. Kate approached gently, careful not to startle them. "Hello again," she said softly. Gracie looked up, face breaking into a grin. "Miss Kate?" Sawyer gave a respectful nod. "Didn't expect you'd come back." Kate smiled politely. "I don't make promises I don't intend to keep." He nodded, and for a moment their eyes held, not confrontational, but curious. He wasn't used to kindness that didn't ask for something in return. Gracie jumped up. "Do we still get to warm up together?" Kate tilted her head. "Absolutely." She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a small, portable speaker. "Let's find a bit of space." Gracie led the way to a quiet patch of grass behind the stage. Kate set the speaker down and pressed play. A soft piano melody filled the air, gentle, melancholic, and familiar. It was Claire de Lune, and it suited the moment perfectly. They began slowly, Kate guiding, Gracie following. No spoken instructions, just movement, intuition. Sawyer watched from a distance, his arms still folded, but something inside him slowly unfurling. He wasn't a man of poetry, but the sight of his daughter, spinning, laughing, learning, was the most beautiful verse he'd ever witnessed. Kate moved gracefully despite the limp that lingered in her right leg. Her injury was old now, but not forgotten. Every step she took came with a silent reminder of a past she'd never fully buried. But with Gracie, the weight lifted. "You're a natural," Kate said after a series of spins. Gracie puffed proudly. "Daddy says I dance like I don't know how to be afraid." Kate's smile faltered for a brief second, her eyes flicking toward Sawyer. "Then he's a wise man." Gracie twirled one more time and stumbled, falling softly into the grass. She giggled. "Oops." "Real dancers fall," Kate said. "But the best ones always stand back up." Gracie rolled over onto her back, staring at the sky. "I'll want to be the best one someday." Kate sat down beside her. "You already are, because you dance with joy. That's rarer than you think." Sawyer slowly walked over. "She's been watching old dance videos on our RV's tiny screen since she was 5. Keeps a notebook of steps she wants to learn." Kate looked up at him, shaded her eyes from the sun. "You've done more for her than most parents ever do?" He shifted, uncomfortable with praise. "Just trying to keep her light from going out." Kate nodded. "I understand." There was a pause. The breeze rustled the trees above them. Gracie picked a dandelion from the grass and held it up. "Do you believe in wishes?" she asked Kate. Kate took the flower and twirled it between her fingers. "I used to. What changed?" Kate hesitated. "I stopped asking for them." "Why?" Gracie asked, her voice quiet. Kate looked at Sawyer briefly before answering. "Because I was wishing for something that had already passed." Gracie, wise beyond her years in some ways, simply said, "Then wish for something new." Kate smiled, blinking away the sting behind her eyes. "Maybe I will." Just then, Nettie Monroe walked over, clipboard in hand. "Gracie, You're on second tonight, after the local ukulele trio. Gracie gasped. That's soon. Kate stood, brushed grass from her skirt. Then we better get your stage face ready. Gracie ran off to find her bag, the gold ribbon fluttering behind her. Sawyer turned to Kate. I appreciate what you're doing. You didn't have to. Kate studied him. I wanted to, he nodded. That's rare. So is a father who shows up like this every day, she replied. There was silence, not awkward, just meaningful. Kate glanced at the stage. Will you watch from the front row? Wouldn't miss it, Sawyer said. She smiled. Good. I'll be in the third row. It's where I always sat. Before everything. Sawyer tilted his head. You mean back when you performed? She nodded. I was 15 when I did my first solo on a professional stage, 28 when I tore the ligament that ended it all. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Kate shrugged. Life turns corners when we're not looking, but sometimes it turns towards something better. Sawyer looked out toward the field, where Gracie danced alone now, her arms stretched to the sky. Maybe this is her corner. Kate followed his gaze. Maybe it's yours too. She turned to leave, walking slowly back to her row, her limp soft but still present. Sawyer watched her go, feeling a strange sensation settle in his chest. Not longing, not admiration, something deeper. Hope. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't just thinking about surviving, he was thinking about what it meant to start again. The sky had turned a deep indigo by the time Gracie stood at the edge of the stage. Lanterns strung above swayed gently in the breeze, casting warm halos of light over the lawn where dozens of families had gathered. Fireflies blinked lazily in the tall grass, and the murmurs of the crowd carried an electric hum, the way a town sounds when it's waiting for something unexpected to happen. Sawyer sat in the front row, fingers locked tightly between his knees. His heart beat louder than the applause that followed the previous act, a trio of teenage boys strumming ukuleles and crooning about summer nights. Gracie stood just beyond the curtain, the frayed edges of her handmade skirt clutched in both hands. She wore the gold ribbon in her hair. Her breathing was shallow but steady, like someone preparing to jump into deep water. Kate crouched beside her, adjusting the strap of one slipper. You remember what I said? Gracie nodded. Dance like I believe every word. Kate smiled. Good girl. The MC's voice echoed over the speaker. And now performing a ballet solo, Miss Gracie Prescott. Scattered applause. A few polite whoops. One loud whistle. Sawyer, of course. Gracie stepped into the light. There was a pause, brief but heavy. Her small frame, her simple clothes, the contrast with the polished stage, it all made the audience hesitate. The judgment wasn't cruel, but it was present. From the third row, Kate leaned forward, her eyes unwavering. The music began, Waltz of the Flowers, the same as rehearsal, but this time Gracie wasn't just practicing, she was delivering something sacred. She moved with a surprising elegance, the kind that didn't come from formal lessons or mirrors, but from something more honest. Her arms floated like petals on the wind. Her spins, though not textbook perfect, carried the freedom of a soul unburdened. The crowd fell silent. Gracie's focus never wavered. She danced not for them, but through them, like her movement was unlocking a door inside each person watching. The whispered laughter from rehearsal was gone. So were the glances. In their place, awe. Sawyer's throat ached. He wasn't sure if he was breathing. He watched his daughter lift herself into a leap, small but filled with daring, and land as though kissed by the earth. She twirled once more, then ended with arms raised, eyes to the sky, her gold ribbon catching the light like a burst of sunlight. Silence. Then one clap from Kate, then another, and suddenly the field erupted. Applause poured like rain. Some stood, a few wiped their eyes, and from somewhere behind him, Sawyer heard someone say, "I didn't expect that from her." He smiled through the sting in his eyes. "They'll never underestimate her again." Gracie bowed. Not once, but twice. Then she skipped off stage, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. Sawyer met her halfway behind the curtain, scooping her up into a hug that nearly crushed them both. "You were lightning, Firefly," he said, voice cracking. "You lit up the whole sky." She beamed. "Did you see my leap?" "Are you kidding? I felt it." Kate approached a moment later, her gaze soft. "You moved them, every single one." Gracie tilted her head. "Even the lady who called me poor?" Kate blinked, caught off guard. Then she nodded. "Especially her." Gracie grinned, then turned to run toward the back of the stage, where the other kids had gathered with juice boxes and cupcakes. Sawyer looked at Kate. "You made that possible." "No," she said. "She did. I just gave her a hand." He paused. "Thank you anyway." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the lanterns sway. The applause still echoed faintly. "You miss it?" he asked. "The stage?" Kate exhaled. "Every day. But tonight, I didn't feel like I missed it. I felt like I shared it." He glanced at her. "She brought something out of you too, didn't she?" Kate gave him a knowing smile. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just easier to believe in magic when you see it dancing in front of you." Sawyer looked toward Gracie, who was now handing out dandelions to the other children, like prizes. Her joy was unfiltered, unapologetic. "She deserves the world," he murmured. "You're giving it to her," Kate replied, "bit by bit." A hush fell over the crowd again as the MC returned to announce the next act. But the afterglow of Gracie's performance lingered, like the scent of jasmine on a summer night, soft, persistent, unforgettable. Kate turned to leave. "I'll stop by tomorrow. I have an idea I'd like to run by you." He nodded. "You're always welcome." As she walked away, Sawyer realized something. Tonight hadn't just been a turning point for Gracie. It had been one for him too, and maybe, just maybe, for Kate as well. Sunday morning came soft and slow, the kind of morning that felt like a blessing. The heat of summer hadn't yet claimed the day, and a gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the oak trees that lined the edges of the RV park. Gracie lay curled up on the RV's pull-out bed, still wrapped in dreams, her gold ribbon trailing from her hair like a flag of victory. Sawyer sat on the steps outside, sipping coffee from a chipped tin mug, watching the world in its quiet beginning. The night before felt like a dream, one of those rare, luminous evenings where everything felt right, if only for a while. He thought about the applause, the way Gracie had glowed on stage, the way Kate had watched her like she'd just witnessed something sacred. Sawyer wasn't a man who let his mind wander often. Life had taught him the cost of dreaming too big. But this morning he allowed himself the indulgence. That's when he saw her, Kate Waverley, walking down the gravel path toward the RV, a small bag in one hand, a rolled-up paper under her arm, and a slight bounce in her step that made her look younger than she had in days prior. Sawyer stood and wiped his hands on his jeans, suddenly self-conscious. "Morning," he said. Kate smiled. "Morning. You always make house calls this early?" "I brought muffins," she replied, holding up the paper bag. "Figured it might sweeten the intrusion." Sawyer chuckled. "Well, in that case, you're forgiven." She handed him the bag. "Blueberry and banana nut. Baked fresh at the church bake sale this morning." He opened the bag, inhaled. That's better than any alarm clock I've ever had. Kate held out the rolled paper. And this is what I wanted to show you. He unrolled it slowly, brows lifting as he took it in. A hand-drawn sketch of a small dance studio layout. Wooden floors, wide-open windows, no mirrors. Just space and light. You drew this? He asked. Kate nodded. It's an old storage room behind the community centre. Used to be a gardening workshop, but it hasn't been used in years. I talked to Nettie. She says if we're willing to clean it out, it's ours. Sawyer looked at her. You want to open a studio? Not a studio, Kate said. A sanctuary for kids like Gracie. Kids who dance not because they want trophies, but because they need to feel free. He ran a hand through his hair. That's big. Kate shrugged, but her voice was steady. I've been searching for purpose since the stage slipped away from me. Maybe this is it. And maybe it's time to stop surviving alone. He met her eyes, and for the first time in years, he let someone else's hope echo inside him. I can help with the repairs, he said. I've got tools, skills. I know, she smiled. I was counting on that. Just then, the RV door creaked open. Gracie stood in the doorway, hair wild from sleep, hugging her ballerina keychain. Miss Kate? She asked, rubbing her eyes. You're here? Kate smiled. I brought muffins. Gracie grinned. Then you can stay forever. They all sat on the steps, passing muffins back and forth, talking about everything and nothing, like old friends who didn't realize they had become old friends. Later that afternoon, they visited the community centre. The storage room was dusty, the windows fogged, the floor buried under boxes of old trophies and gardening tools. But beneath the layers of time, Sawyer could see the bones of something beautiful. As he pried open a stuck window and let the sunlight stream in, he turned to Kate. It's going to take work. She looked around, a spark in her eyes. It'll be worth it. Gracie stepped inside, spinning once in the open space. Dust danced around her like glitter. Can we call it the room with no mirrors? She asked. Kate's breath caught. Yes, she said softly. Yes, we can. Over the next few hours they cleared shelves, sorted tools and swept the floor. Gracie made a game out of stacking boxes, declaring herself Queen of Cardboard Mountain. Sawyer pulled old nails from the baseboards, every motion steady, deliberate. He hadn't built anything permanent in years. Most of his work was patch jobs, quick fixes. This felt different. This felt like planting something. As the sun lowered in the sky, casting amber light across the hardwood, they took a break. Gracie sat in the windowsill, holding a dandelion she'd picked from the lot out front. She held it up to Kate. Make a wish. Kate hesitated. Then she closed her eyes. Sawyer watched her. When she opened them, she whispered, I wished for a beginning. Gracie blew on the dandelion, seeds scattered like stars. Then it's already on its way, she said simply. Kate smiled. You're wise for your age. Gracie shrugged. I live in a house on wheels. You learn things faster. They all laughed. Sawyer stood, stretching his back. We should head out, let the dust settle. Kate looked at him. Tomorrow, same time? Yeah, he said, then added, I'd like that. As they walked back to the RV, Kate beside him, Gracie skipping ahead, Sawyer felt something shift in his chest, not a falling, a loosening. And in the space it left behind, hope began to bloom again. By the end of the week, the old storage room had shed its past like a snake sheds its skin. Gone were the rusted garden rakes and crumbling trophies from forgotten decades. In their place stood bare wooden floors, still scuffed, still imperfect, but open, warm, waiting. The walls had been washed and patched, and the windows now let in long rivers of sunlight that danced on the ground like echoes of music not yet played. Sawyer stepped back to admire the work, paint roller still in hand. His shirt was stained, a smudge of white on his jaw, but his eyes held a quiet pride he didn't bother to hide. Kate stood beside him, arms crossed, sleeves rolled up. "It's not a studio yet," she said. "No," Sawyer agreed, "but it's a beginning." Gracie burst in just then, trailing ribbons behind her like streamers. She wore a tutu they'd found at the thrift store, slightly too big, pinned at the waist with a safety pin and optimism. "It smells like lemon soap and sawdust," she declared. "I love it." She spun across the floor, bare feet thumping softly, her laughter filling the space like a hymn. Kate watched her, then turned to Sawyer. "We need a name." "She already named it," he said. "The room with no mirrors?" Kate blinked. She was serious? She's usually serious when she says things that sound magical. Kate smiled. "It's perfect." That afternoon, the first children arrived. 3 of them, all from different corners of town. There was Bailey, a shy girl with frizzy curls who carried a book everywhere and spoke in whispers. Then Luke, a wiry 10-year-old who claimed he couldn't dance but liked the idea of moving. And finally, little Maria, who hadn't said a word since her mother left 6 months prior, but clung to her stuffed bear like it was her heart. Kate greeted each child with the same warmth, kneeling to their level, asking no questions they didn't want to answer. There were no sign-up sheets, no fees, no uniforms, just space and welcome. Sawyer watched from the corner, hammering in the last nail on a coat rack he'd built from salvaged barn wood. He didn't think of himself as a teacher, but when Bailey's shoelace snapped and she began to cry, it was Sawyer who knelt down and tied it tight, offering her a quiet joke that made her smile through the tears. "Didn't peg you as a shoelace whisperer," Kate said later when the kids had left and the room was quiet again. Sawyer smirked. "Parenting teaches you weird superpowers." They stood in the doorway, watching the fading sunlight turn the room gold. Gracie was still twirling in the center, lost in her own world. "She's happier," Kate said. "She's safer," Sawyer replied. Kate tilted her head. "You mean with the room, or with me?" He met her eyes. "Both." A beat of silence passed between them, comfortable, honest. "She's helping me too," Kate said softly. "More than she knows." Sawyer looked back at Gracie. "She has a way of doing that." Kate hesitated. "You know, I haven't danced in front of anyone in years." "You danced with her," Sawyer said. "That didn't feel like performing. That felt like remembering." He looked at her more closely, noticing the way her eyes clouded just slightly, as if still haunted by a ghost from her past. "Do you want to try?" he asked. Kate blinked. "Now?" "You don't have to, but the room's empty. Feels like it's waiting." She glanced toward the floor, then slowly slipped off her shoes. Her steps were tentative at first, the limp still visible, but something shifted in her as she moved across the studio, shoulders relaxing, breath slowing. Gracie saw her and stepped aside, eyes wide. She watched in silence as Kate moved. No music, no audience, just grace reclaimed. Sawyer stood at the edge of the room, hands in his pockets, his heart thudding with something quiet but strong. When Kate finally stopped, there were tears in her eyes, but they weren't sorrowful, they were whole. "I didn't know I still could," she whispered. "You didn't forget," Sawyer said. "You were just waiting for the right reason." Kate turned to him, and for the first time didn't look away. "Thank you," she said. He shrugged. I just fixed a floor. No, she replied. You built something steady for all of us. That evening, as the sky faded to velvet and Gracie dozed off in the back seat of the RV, Sawyer found himself driving Kate home. Her small cottage sat nestled among tall grass and wild rose bushes. The porch light flickered as she stepped out. She paused at the door. I didn't expect this, she said. What? You, her, the room, any of it. He nodded. Neither did I. For a moment, the night held them still. Then Kate smiled, soft and real. Same time tomorrow? Wouldn't miss it. As she disappeared inside, Sawyer sat in the truck for a long time before driving off. The world outside was quiet. But inside him, something had begun to hum again. Not loneliness, not longing, but possibility. The sky that morning wore a coat of soft grey, and the air carried the earthy scent of distant rain. Inside the little studio, however, there was warmth, sunlight filtering through the windows, the sound of quiet laughter, and the rhythmic beat of feet learning to trust the floor beneath them. Gracie sat cross-legged near the corner, helping Bailey tape the loose strap on her slipper. Don't worry, she said, tongue poking out slightly in concentration. My first shoes were made from cardboard and duct tape. Bailey's eyes widened. Really? Gracie nodded. And I still did 3 spins without falling. Okay, maybe just 2. Kate watched them from across the room, her heart swelling at the tenderness. Each child who walked through the door carried something with them, grief, insecurity, silence. And somehow, within these 4 imperfect walls, those burdens softened. Sawyer was fixing a light bulb near the entrance when he heard a sharp voice outside. I told you not to bring those, a woman snapped. A moment later, the door creaked open, and in shuffled a small girl with chestnut skin, thin limbs and eyes that darted toward every corner like they were looking for somewhere to hide. Her name was Lila. She'd come once before, quietly, clinging to the edge of the room, barely moving. Today she wore shoes far too big, men's loafers, battered and cracked. They flopped awkwardly as she walked, and as the other kids turned to stare, Lila froze mid-step. Someone giggled. Then a voice whispered, She looks like a clown. Lila's shoulders curled inward. Kate crossed the room in seconds, her voice gentle but firm. All right, let's give Lila some space. Why don't we all grab a spot on the floor? The others obeyed, but the tension lingered. Sawyer caught the look on Lila's face, embarrassment laced with shame, the kind that sinks deep and festers. He'd seen it before, on Gracie's face, on his own, years ago. Kate knelt beside Lila. Do you want to stay? Lila didn't answer. Her hands clutched the 2 large shoes as if they might be taken away. Kate stood. Gracie, could you come here a moment? Gracie trotted over. Do you remember your first dance shoes? Kate asked her, just loud enough for the room to hear. Gracie grinned. Sure, they were made from an old cereal box and Dad's duct tape. One ripped during a spin, and I fell into a plant. The room chuckled. Even Lila looked up, startled. Kate crouched beside Gracie and motioned her closer. Gracie whispered something, then dashed to the corner where she kept her old bag. She returned holding her first pair of ballet shoes, still dented, still patched, still full of story. These got me through my first show, Gracie said. They might be a little small for me now, but they still believe in magic. She held them out to Lila. For a moment, Lila just stared. Then she stepped out of the oversized loafers and slipped the ballet slippers onto her feet. They fit. Not perfectly, but well enough to stand, to walk, to try. Kate looked around the room. Let's begin again. That day's lesson wasn't about movement or form. It was about courage, about showing up with whatever you had, however broken it might be, and knowing it was enough. Lila didn't speak, but she danced. Tentative, yes, but real. Sawyer leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Watching these small moments unfold reminded him of how quietly lives were changed, not by grand gestures, but by kindness, passed hand to hand like heirlooms. Later that evening, after the children had gone, Sawyer helped Kate sweep the floor. Gracie sat outside on the stoop, making dandelion crowns from the weeds that grew between cracks in the sidewalk. Kate glanced at Sawyer. "Thank you." He looked up. "For what?" "For not flinching." He tilted his head. "At what?" "At the hard stuff. Kids showing up with broken shoes, parents who whisper too loud. You just stay." He shrugged. "I've learned that sometimes staying is the bravest thing a person can do." She smiled faintly. "You'd have made a good dance partner." "I don't know the first thing about ballet." Kate met his eyes. "It's not always about knowing the steps. Sometimes it's just about showing up at the right time." Outside, Gracie held up a crown.
"Dad, Miss Kate, this one's for the Queen and King of the studio." Kate laughed. "Oh, I like the sound of that." Sawyer took the flower crown and placed it gently on Kate's head. "Your Majesty," she curtsied. "Sir Sawyer of Squeaky Floorboards?" They both laughed, the kind of laughter that came from somewhere deeper than amusement, the kind that said, "I see you, I trust you, I'm glad you're here." And for the first time in years, neither of them felt like they were dancing alone.
The air buzzed with energy the morning of the spring recital. Flyers had gone up around town. One night only, a celebration of joy through dance. The community centre parking lot was nearly full by noon. Volunteers strung fairy lights above the outdoor stage, and folding chairs dotted the grassy slope like daisies in a field. Someone had even built a small wooden sign, "The Room with No Mirrors Presents." Gracie stood in front of the cracked bathroom mirror inside the RV, nervously adjusting her dress, an off-white ballet outfit donated by a woman from the church. Kate had helped tailor it to fit just right, pinning tiny gold sequins around the waistline that shimmered whenever Gracie moved. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to fix the ribbon in her hair. Sawyer stood in the kitchenette behind her, holding something small in his hand. "I've got something for you." Gracie turned, brows lifting. He stepped forward and knelt. In his palm was a single dandelion bloom, freshly picked, its stem trimmed short. She smiled, tears rising before she could stop them. He gently tucked it behind her ear. "You're not just my firefly tonight. You're the star." Gracie flung her arms around him, and he held her close. "Are you scared?" he asked softly. She nodded against his shoulder. "A little." "That's okay," he said. "Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about dancing anyway." At the community centre, chairs were filling fast. Nettie Monroe stood near the entrance, clipboard in hand, directing volunteers and greeting guests with her usual blend of sass and sincerity. Kate Waverley moved gracefully among the performers, 10 children in all, checking shoelaces, smoothing wrinkles, whispering words of encouragement. She wore a simple black dress and a smile that hinted at quiet pride. When Gracie arrived, Kate gave her a long, warm look. "You ready to fly?" Gracie took a deep breath. "Only if you're watching." "I wouldn't miss it." Backstage was a flurry of nerves. Lila paced with her stuffed bear. Bailey practiced her turns in the corner. Luke tried to hide his excitement beneath mock yawns. But the energy was alive, bright, hopeful, unstoppable. Sawyer sat in the third row this time, letting Kate take the front. She had earned it. She had built it. He folded his hands in his lap, eyes fixed on the stage, remembering the first time he'd seen Gracie perform, in a borrowed skirt, on a dusty plywood square beneath a skeptical crowd. That night had felt like survival. This night felt like home. The lights dimmed. Nettie took the mic, her voice steady. "Welcome, friends and neighbors. Tonight, you won't see perfection. You'll see something better. You'll see bravery." Applause rippled through the crowd. The performances began. Bailey danced to a soft violin solo, arms like poetry. Luke brought unexpected joy with a jazz number that had the kids clapping along. Lila, in Gracie's old slippers, moved with such tentative grace it brought tears to Kate's eyes. Then the MC spoke. "And now, a solo performance by Gracie Prescott." Silence fell. Not of doubt, but of expectation. Gracie stepped onto the stage. Her white dress glowed under the soft lights. The gold ribbon in her hair shimmered like a secret. And the dandelion, still bright, was tucked gently behind her ear. The music began. Claire de Lune. She didn't rush. Her first step was soft, then another, then a turn, small but precise. Sawyer leaned forward. Gracie moved like the wind had taught her how, light, curious, unafraid. She leapt, not high but true, and landed with a softness that brought a collective sigh from the crowd. And then, in the quiet middle of the song, she did something no one expected. She stopped, stood center stage, closed her eyes, and danced with no music, just breath and stillness and heart. A murmur rippled through the audience. Then quietly, Kate stood, and without words, she stepped onto the edge of the stage and lifted one arm. Gracie mirrored her. Then another child joined them, then another. Soon the entire group, every student of the room with no mirrors, was on stage, dancing not to impress, not for applause, but together. The music returned softly for the final notes. As the last chord faded, the children stood in a circle. Gracie bowed. So did they. Silence. Then an eruption of applause so loud it startled the birds from the trees. Sawyer stood, hands raw from clapping. Kate stepped off the stage, her eyes wet but shining. She found Sawyer's gaze and smiled, a smile not of pride, but of arrival. This was what they'd built, not just a room, but a sanctuary. Gracie ran to her father, leapt into his arms. "You were perfect," he said. "I stopped," she whispered. "I know," he smiled. "And it was the most beautiful pause I've ever seen." That night, as the stars came out and lanterns flickered above the empty lawn, Kate and Sawyer sat on the steps of the studio, sipping lemonade from paper cups. "She's different now," Kate said, "more grounded, more open." "She found her voice," Sawyer replied. "And what about you?" she asked gently. He looked at her, the quiet night settling around them. "I think I'm ready to start over," he said. Kate leaned her head against his shoulder, and neither of them said anything else. Because sometimes beginnings don't need words, just a stage, a child's belief, and a dandelion in her hair. It rained the next morning. Not the heavy kind that soaks your bones and turns roads to mud, but a gentle, misty rain that painted the town in silver and hush. Leaves trembled under droplets and rooftops whispered under the weight of it. Even the light seemed softer, as though the sky wanted everyone to slow down. Inside the RV, Sawyer sipped coffee at the tiny table, his gaze drifting out the fogged window. Gracie was still asleep, curled beneath her favorite quilt, a smile ghosting across her face even in slumber. He liked to think she was dreaming of the stage, the applause, the dandelion, the feeling of being seen. He hadn't planned on seeing Kate that morning. But when he opened the RV door to step out, There she was, standing under a shared umbrella with Nettie Monroe, the older woman talking animatedly, while Kate laughed in that quiet, thoughtful way of hers. Sawyer stepped down the steps and into the mist, rubbing the back of his neck. "Morning." Kate looked over, her eyes lighting up as if the grey sky hadn't touched her at all. "Hi." Nettie handed her the umbrella and winked. "I'll leave you two to your weather." Kate walked over, raindrops clinging to her lashes. She wore a navy blue raincoat and boots that had clearly seen their share of storms. "I brought muffins." Sawyer smiled. "You bribing me again?" "Always," she grinned, handing him a paper bag. "Maple walnut, warm if you eat them in the next 2 minutes." They took shelter inside the RV, and for a few moments all was quiet, but for the sound of rain tapping the metal roof. Gracie stirred in the back, then rolled over with a sleepy sigh. Kate sat across from Sawyer at the little table, folding her hands. "You've been quiet since the recital." He nodded, then shrugged. "Still taking it in?" She tilted her head. "The applause?" "No," he said. The way she looked, like the whole world opened up for her. I never thought I'd get to see that." Kate's voice was soft. "You gave her that chance." He met her eyes. "We did." There was a pause, one of those rare, fragile silences that doesn't need to be filled. Then Kate said, "I'm thinking of teaching again. Officially." Sawyer blinked. "Like a job?" She nodded. "Someone from the city reached out after seeing photos Nettie posted. They're opening a community arts centre. Want me to head the youth dance program?" He felt something inside tighten, but not from jealousy. From the weight of possibility, of things changing. "You should do it," he said finally. Kate smiled, though it was laced with sadness. "It's 2 hours away." "Still worth it." "But what about the room with no mirrors?" Sawyer looked down, tracing the rim of his mug. "It'll still be here. Kids still need it. I can keep it standing, patch up the floors, keep the lights on." Kate reached across the table, placing her hand lightly over his. "And what about you?" she asked. He looked at her hand before lifting his eyes. "What about me?" "Who patches you up?" That question sat between them like an open book, unread, but not unfamiliar. He took a breath. "I don't know how to do this." "Which part?" He swallowed. "The part where I want something and don't run from it?" Kate smiled gently. "Then don't run." Her fingers laced through his. Sawyer closed his eyes for a beat. When he opened them, he leaned forward, his forehead touching hers. "I'm scared," he admitted. She whispered, "Me too." Then he kissed her, soft, certain, not rushed. A kiss born not from desperation but from recognition. Of two people who had carried too much for too long, and now found someone willing to share the weight. When they pulled apart, neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence held everything that mattered. Later that afternoon, the rain lifted. Gracie insisted they go to the studio. "I have something to leave there," she said, holding her dandelion crown, now a little faded but still golden. The three of them arrived to an empty room, bathed in soft light. The children's drawings still lined the back wall, stick figures in pirouettes, flowers with smiling faces, stars and hearts everywhere. Gracie walked to the center of the room, knelt, and placed the crown gently on the floor. "It belongs here," she said, "so the next kid who walks in knows they're already special." Kate looked at her, eyes misty. "You're going to change the world?" Gracie beamed. "One twirl at a time." Sawyer turned to Kate. "You still thinking about leaving?" She hesitated. "I don't know." He nodded. Whatever you choose, you've got two people who will be cheering for you. Always. Kate took his hand again. The dandelion crown lay quietly on the floor between them. A symbol of second chances, of love rekindled not with fire but with warmth, of lives that once felt broken, now gently, patiently made whole. Summer arrived slowly that year, like someone returning home after a long absence. The air grew sweeter. The trees heavier with bloom. Life in the little town shifted, not in grand ways but in the gentle way dandelions push through sidewalk cracks. Quiet, determined, unnoticed, until suddenly everything feels softer. The room with no mirrors had become more than a studio. It was a gathering place now, a sanctuary. Word had spread through coffee shop whispers, Sunday service bulletins, and playground stories passed from one parent to another. Children came not just to dance, but to be heard, to be seen, to be free. Gracie had grown taller, her steps more confident, but her heart remained the same. Each day after school, she rushed to the studio, often leading warm-ups for the younger kids. She was no longer just a student. She was becoming something else, a symbol. Kate stood in front of the wide window, watching the children move. Her fingers rested gently on the windowsill, her thoughts quiet. The offer from the city still sat on her kitchen table, unsigned. It was tempting, a full-time role, salary, prestige, the kind of opportunity she once would have leapt for. But every time she stood in this little studio, with its creaky floors and sunlight-streaked walls, she heard laughter echo in her chest, saw the crown Gracie had left in the corner, felt Sawyer's hand brush against hers as he passed her a cup of coffee, like it belonged there. She wasn't sure where she belonged 5 months ago. Now she wasn't sure she belonged anywhere else. That Friday, they hosted the first Open Studio Day. Everyone was invited, families, friends, curious neighbours. Children brought art to pin on the walls. Parents brought folding chairs and home-baked pies. Nettie Monroe arrived with a clipboard and a loud whistle that she wielded with pride. Sawyer had spent the whole morning hanging a hand-carved sign above the door. It read, simply, "You belong here." He didn't ask Kate's permission before hanging it. He didn't need to. As the sun dipped low and the studio filled with soft music and barefoot dancers, Gracie tugged on Sawyer's hand. "Can I do something?" she whispered. "Anything you want, Firefly." She stood in the center of the room and clapped once. The music stopped. "I want to say something," she said, her voice carrying just enough to silence the chatter. "I used to think you had to be perfect to dance," she said. "But Miss Kate taught me that dancing is just how your heart talks when words aren't enough." Kate's eyes shimmered. "My dad says dandelions are like little wishes, that even if people try to pull them up, they always come back. That's what we are here." She turned to the wall and picked up the dandelion crown. Though wilted, it still held its shape. She placed it gently in the center of the floor. "Everyone who walks in here gets to make a wish, but not like birthday wishes. These are the kind that change you." No one clapped, no one moved, because they all knew she wasn't just saying something sweet. She was telling the truth. Later that night, the guests slowly drifted home under a canopy of stars. Laughter lingered in the air. The studio dimmed to a golden hush, the windows glowing like lanterns. Sawyer walked Kate home, as he always did now. They said little. They didn't need to. At her front porch, she turned to him. "I didn't sign the contract," he smiled. "I figured." "I thought it meant giving something up," she said. "But staying feels like gaining something instead." He stepped closer, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "What changed?" he asked. "You," she said simply. "Gracie, this place, me." Then she kissed him, this time not tentative, not wondering, just right. They stood together for a while after that, listening to the cicadas sing to the stars, the hush of wind weaving through trees like a lullaby. Weeks passed, then months. One morning, Kate walked into the studio and found something taped to the wall, an envelope with her name written in glittery purple marker. Gracie's handwriting. Inside was a drawing, a stick-figure girl with a dandelion in one hand and a heart in the other. Above her head, in bold letters, "Thank you for letting me be me." Kate sat down right there on the floor and cried. But it wasn't sadness. It was gratitude. Because sometimes, in a world so full of noise and performance, the quietest truths carried the loudest meaning. On the first anniversary of The Room with No Mirrors, they held a celebration. No stage, no spotlights, just music, food, and a field full of dandelions. Kate and Sawyer danced together for the first time. Not choreographed, not elegant, just two people moving in the sunlight, laughing, clumsy and whole. Gracie, in a blue dress and bare feet, watched them with a grin. Someone handed her a dandelion. She closed her eyes, and this time she didn't wish to dance on a stage. She didn't wish for applause. She wished for this, for now, for always. Then she blew. The seeds lifted into the sky, carried by wind, by time, by every heart that had passed through the little room where mirrors were never needed, because they had all learned something sacred. What matters most is not what the world sees, but what you dare to believe about yourself. And that was enough to change everything. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. It warms our hearts to see how these stories connect us across cities, countries, and generations.